Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Megan.
And I'm Sierra. We are back with yet another book video. This one is going to be pretty exciting because it's going to be, if you've read this, then try reading this.
Yeah, so we were actually going through and planning this yesterday, and it was really fun to try and figure out what different plots we thought were similar and what things made books similar, but also we want to let you guys know how books are similar, but then also how things are a little bit different, so that if you haven't read one or the other, you can at least maybe pick one to start with and see what one you like more, and then if you do like that book, then you can try the other one that we want to recommend.
Yeah, so we have 10 different conversions, I guess. So that's 20 books total. We have plenty of recommendations for you guys. A little bit of something for everyone. We've got some thriller, we've got some romance,
historical fiction,
a little bit of it all. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, so the first recommendation we have is if you've read Love and Other Words, then we think you would really also like Every Summer After. I have some notes on my laptop in front of me, so I'm just going to kind of read it from that. But we've
tried to just summarize in our own words before, and it's never gone well, so we just pre-wrote
some summarized stuff beforehand. We have similarities and differences. So in Love and Other Words, the main character is Macy. She's a doctor, and she goes out to get coffee with a friend, and then while she's there, she actually runs into someone that she has not seen for 10 years. And so his name is Elliot. The story alternates between past and present, and in the past, Macy's family gets a lake house. They end up going up every summer, and then Elliot is the neighbor boy who she ends up getting pretty close to, and so each chapter where they're going back in the past, it's kind of like them getting older, growing up together,
relationship, that kind of thing.
And so in the present, then Elliot is trying to rekindle their past relationship, and this whole time you don't really understand what happened 10 years ago, the last time they saw each other, that caused them to never speak again. And so as you're going back and forth between past and present, you're trying to figure out what exactly happened that led to that. So that's kind of the premise for Love and Other Words. I really like that book. And then this one is Every Summer After. It's honestly these books are so similar.
Megan could read the same plot. And
I barely have any differences. So for this one, the main character, her name's Percy. She gets a call from a childhood friend that their mom has passed away, and she has not seen these people also in 10 years, but she's like, I really feel like I need to go to this, to their mom's funeral because I just knew them well and I was close with the family. So she goes back to this town that her family had a lake house there when she was younger, and they'd go visit there when they were growing up, but she had not been in 10 years since they sold the lake house.
There was a neighbor boy at that same lake house.
That
friendship, romance ensues, relationship forms.
So very, very similar. So things that they have in common, there's past and present POV between both of these books, alternating between growing up together and during the summer at their lake houses, and then the present, how they're doing now and what their relationship is like as they're trying to rebuild it. Girl has a lake house, that's similar, and they meet the next door neighbor, they fall in love, so that's the key of both of these books, very similar. I also recognized when I was doing this planning was that in Love and Other Words, she grows up to be a doctor, and then in this one, the guy ends up growing up to be a doctor. So that's kind of it's not a key part of the book, but it is similar.
Detail.
And then it's just navigating how their past relationships could possibly fit in with their current lives and relationships, because at least one of the characters in the current book is in the middle of a relationship, and so they're oh, what do I do with this? And then how they're different. The reasons that they stopped talking are fairly different. One's a lot more serious than the other, but also the premise of the book is very similar.
Yeah, and I feel in both books, the reasoning for stopping talking, it's an interesting reveal, but it's not an integral part of the story. So yeah, definitely if you've read one and liked one, read the other, and I'm sure you'll also like it. Okay, so the next kind of comparison we have is if you've read November 9th, then you should read Confess. So both of these are Colleen Hoover books, but I feel November 9th is way more talked about and way more read than Confess. I feel no one talks about it, and Confess was my first Colleen Hoover read, so I'm kind of partial to it, but I'm going to kind of read from my computer and give the summary at least of November 9th to start. Alright, so while having a less than stellar encounter with her dad at a local cafe, Fallon finds herself in a fake relationship with Ben, who kind of jumps into the booth and is like, hey honey, how's it going? And she's like, who is this dude? I don't know you. But he kind of tries to get her dad off her back a little bit, and they end up leaving together and spending the rest of the day together, but that's the only day they can really actually spend together because Fallon is leaving for New York, but they have such a great time that they decide, what if we decided, it's November 9th, what if in 1 year we also meet up on November 9th, but we have no communication, we go cold turkey, and just we have to trust that we're both gonna meet up at the same spot next year.
And the guy's trying to write a book.
Yeah,
So
and so
he's
he
like,
needs
I'll
an
write
idea.
a story about, you know, these encounters that we have with each other. He's like, that's perfect. You'll focus on writing your book. I'm just going to go focus on myself and not communicate with you
Yeah, because
beyond
they both
just
like really
this
want
day.
to focus on like their own lives. So like we don't want anything like committing to anything. We're just gonna have like fun for one day and then like part ways. And so this goes on for a number of years, just like on the same day, trusting that they're going to meet up. And then on that
They literally have no
day,
communication. They say, okay, we're meeting up back here 1 year from now, and there's nothing they can do to like change or alter the plans if it doesn't work out.
so as the years go on, they like each learn kind of what's going on in each other's lives and how like what's happened over the past year is like drastically changing, and like they both get kind of stressed because like they're realizing how much more invested they are in this like 1 day relationship than they originally thought or intended. So also at the end there's a big twist that kind of like encapsulates like the whole story and ties it up in a nice little bow. It was a shock when I read it, so I'm sure you'll also think it was a shock. But that's kind of the premise of November 9th. Now we get on to Confess. So Auburn moves to a new town. She's kind of trying to rebuild her life, and in the meantime she's looking for a job. So she finds a position open at a local art gallery that is owned by Owen. And when these two first meet, they're instantly drawn to each other, but they both have secrets that are kind of like holding them back from trying to pursue anything further. But it's a romance book, they can't help it, they're in love, so they're gonna go after it anyways. And as time goes on, both of their secrets are kind of revealed. Owen's art gallery is actually like about people confessing their secrets and stuff, and so like their secrets are kind of tied into that whole thing. A big reveal at the end with this one too, that kind of helps tie the entire story in a nice little bow. So some of the similarities between Confess and November 9th are the fact that there's dual POVs between the male and female characters. Colleen Hoover tends to do this pretty regularly. I love when books have like the male and female perspective. Also, kind of like I tie on this for both of the summaries, but both of the books have a twist ending that like really just like it
makes
wraps
sense
it all up.
why like they ended up together.
Yeah.
And they like kind of
Like
like just
it-
leave it at that.
I don't want to give too many spoilers, but like when you read it, you'll know what I mean. And then obviously it's the same author, so like the plot styles, the writing styles, the character development, it's similar. If you like Colleen Hoover, just like I think that you will love both of these books. And then also another similarity that I had was that the male protagonist uses like an art form in some way to kind of like reveal his secrets. So Confess is a little bit more on the nose and obvious with like him doing the art gallery with like revealing secrets and confessions. But in the book that Ben is writing in November 9th, he kind of like reveals some of his secrets in that one as well. And that's kind of how the female comes to know of his secrets. So yeah. In ways that they are different, the plots are different, like it's the same, but it's different. Like
It's like Sierra and I, when we first started our reading journey, like back last spring, like 2021, we both picked these books up. Honestly,
At
did
the
not
same
know
time.
about the Colleen Hoover hype back then.
No, we
Like we
didn't.
randomly at Barnes & Noble picked these up. And so Sierra picked this one up. I got November 9th. We read them, and then like both of us like devoured the books. And then we're like, okay, switch.
Yep.
And then it was like, they were very different. Like the plots are not the same, but the feelings and overall story is just like, it felt similar. And it probably has to do with us reading like them back to back. But I think like since then, Sierra and I have just like tied the two together a little
Well,
bit.
'cause I originally, like, they're so similar in my mind that I was like, oh, like, this is what Colleen Hoover does, like, when she writes romance books. And having read more now, I realize that that's not all she does. But I was like, dang, these two, like, are just very similar in, like, how they come off. And the other one is that the relationship timelines between the two people are different. November 9th obviously takes place over the course of years, for one day, like, each of those years. And then Confess is just, like, a regular, continuous timeline.
Okay, we're realizing this is taking a while, so we're either going to start going super fast through these, or we're going to end up making a part 2 video sometime later.
Yeah.
So next one, if you've read the Inheritance Games, then we think you would really also like Truly Devious. So summary for this one, the main character, her name's Avery Grams. She is just a normal high schooler going about her life, and then all of a sudden she finds out that she's inherited this billionaire's fortune. His name is Tobias Hawthorne. She does not know who the guy is, has no idea why she's been left his inheritance. The only catch is she's supposed to go live in the Hawthorne house in order to actually get her inheritance. And so his 4 grandsons and some other family members are living in that house, and they're confused, like, why is she here? Why is she getting inheritance? They're kind of mad, they're upset. And their grandfather was the kind of person who did a lot of like riddles and leaving secrets. And there's like this mystery in terms of trying to figure out why is she the one inheriting the fortune. So they're going through trying to solve this last riddle of his, and she's, you know, developing relationships and friendships with them. Is like, I'm gonna help because I also don't understand what's going on. And so that's the premise of this book. It is a trilogy, same with Truly Devious.
And these are both YA also.
Yeah, and so Then the trilogies series is about Stevie. She is obsessed with the Ellingham Academy. It's this prestigious school where a lot of very smart kids go if they get accepted, and so she writes in saying how she really wants to solve the Ellingham Academy murders that happened decades ago, where the founder of the school, his wife and daughter, were killed, and they convicted someone from it, but she doesn't think that person actually did it, so she's like, I want to go solve this murder. They end up accepting her, and so then she moves into the school, and while she's there trying to solve the case, another student dies, and so in the meantime she's also like, okay, I'm going to try and start figuring out what's going on with this as well, and then you start figuring out, okay, are these tied together? How are these related? So it kind of goes back and forth between trying to solve the decades-old mystery and then also trying to figure out what's going on at the school right now. Okay, so things that they have similar. They're mystery trilogies. This one still has, the third book has not come out yet, but it will be a trilogy. This one, all 3 books are out, and then there's also a 4th book that is an offshoot, like with the same characters, but not fully part of the main trilogy. There's a female protagonist for both of these. It's young adults trying to solve something. So in that sense, kind of similar vibes going on. They're all just like in high school for the most part. And then it's just like an average girl who's dropped into like this elitist group of people. So in this case, it's like the super rich family. In this case, she's surrounded by a bunch of other super popular or wealthy kids that are also going to the school. So in that sense, I feel like that also contributes to the same kind of vibe going on. Differences. This one's focused on family secondary characters. This one's focused on just different teenagers who are her age. And then this one's more of a murder mystery. This one's more so just like a family mystery and trying to figure that out. And then in the inheritance games, there's a little bit of a love triangle. They both have romance subplots, but this one's not so much a love triangle, so they're a little bit different that way.
Okay, so next, I think if you've read The Help, you should consider reading Take My Hand, or vice versa. So The Help follows 3 main characters, Aibileen, Minnie, and Skeeter. Aibileen and Minnie are 2 black maids who work for white families, and Skeeter is a young, white, 22-year-old female who recently graduated from Ole Miss. And basically when Skeeter gets home, she's trying to find her footing as a young writer, but the only job she can get is at the local newspaper, like trying to write an advice, like cleaning column. And being a young white woman who has had the help of black maids her whole life, she doesn't really know what to even give advice on, so she seeks out the help of Aibileen, who's a black maid, to help her write these columns, and they kind of develop like a closer friendship / relationship. Obviously, like Aibileen's kind of holding back the entire time just because she doesn't fully trust Skeeter, even though Skeeter, like of all of the white women she's encountered, has been like relatively nice to her the entire time. Eventually, Skeeter gets the idea that she wants to share Aibileen's and other black maids' stories of working with white families, just seeing how her white friends treat their maids. She's like, this isn't okay, it needs to be shared. But Aibileen and the other black maids are obviously very hesitant to share these stories because they don't want to risk their own safety, their family's safety, anything like that. And so they hold back, but with Skeeter pushing and deciding everything can be anonymous, they decide to go forward with the story, and they write the book called The Help. So the book is called The Help, but the book is The Help about writing a book called The Help. And it kind of goes through the process of how like secretive they have to be while writing the stories and kind of all the risks that they're putting themselves through to get this book published. So that is The Help. Obviously it's a very popular book. It was made into a movie. I'm sure you guys are familiar with what happens. So this is Take My Hand. This was published pretty recently. It was also featured in Book of the Month, so I think that a lot of people are kind of getting their hands on it, but if you are unfamiliar, I'm going to kind of shed some light on what it's about. So Sybil Townsend is a student who's fresh out of nursing school. She is a young black woman, but her family's actually like a pretty well-to-do black family. Her dad is a doctor. She obviously just graduated from nursing school, so she feels like she's in a position where she can actually like help out the black people in her community who are not as well off as she is. So out of nursing school, she decides to get a job at the Montgomery Family Planning Clinic, and their primary goal at that clinic is to try and provide birth control to like as many young black women as possible. So Sybil is sent out on like one of her first tasks, which is to go to this family's house and kind of like see the 2 young daughters there and give them their birth control. The daughters, she finds out, are 11 and 13 years old, and so she's kind of like, why are we giving like these young girls birth control? She finds out like one of them, or both of them, I don't remember, haven't even started their period, and so she just doesn't understand why they're giving them at this time as a birth control shot. And so, but she like carries through the task and eventually finds out that the shot that she's giving them hasn't necessarily even been approved like by the FDA. And so that kind of like gives her pause even more about like, should we be giving this birth control to these people if it's kind of just like in the experimental stage right now? And so she decides to stop giving them birth control, and eventually like the family planning clinic takes things into their own hands. And something happens to the two young girls. So Sybil and the young girls' family, as well as the community around them, try and seek justice for the two girls. It extends far beyond just like the stretches of their community in Montgomery, and like they find it's like a countrywide thing that like black people are just not getting the healthcare that they need. And the story follows them, and also just like how Sybil finds herself like in a role far greater than just like her nursing role that she was expected to be in. So some similarities between the two books. Obviously they're both historical fiction, kind of based off of the trials and tribulations that black people faced. This is in the 60s, and this one's kind of in the early 70s. This also does like do a time jump kind of into the present, when Sybil's like alive in 2016 and like still facing repercussions of what happened back in the 70s. And then also like the main character is in this case Skeeter, in this case Sybil. Both are like young women who are trying to fight a problem that like they're not actively being oppressed or like faced with this problem, but they're kind of inserting themselves into a situation to try and help. So some of the differences related to the last point that I just made. Some people I know have a problem with the help because they feel like since Skeeter is white, like it gives this like kind of like white savior complex. Whereas this book, Sybil is black, and in this case it's more of like the difference in socioeconomic status, that where like Sybil is black but she's pretty well off. She was able to go to school, her family's pretty like middle class, and she's trying to help this other black family who is not as well off as she is. And then also the help focuses more on like the interpersonal interactions between white and black people, versus Take My Hand kind of focuses on more like systemic healthcare issues that black people and disadvantaged people were facing at the time. Okay, so we decided we are going to do a part 2 to this video just because we are talking way too much about each of these books, which is fine. So maybe in a couple weeks we're just going to keep recording after this, so we will have a part 2, but we're going to wait probably a couple weeks before we post it. Get you guys some anticipation building a little bit.
So the last one that we are going to recommend for this video is, if you've read The Maidens, which we don't have a copy of right now, then you should read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. So this one I actually just read, so it's fresh in my mind. So starting with The Maidens, the main character is Mariana, and her husband died a year ago on a trip to Greece that they took, and so since then she's kind of been keeping to herself and not really like going out and living her life. And she's also a psychotherapist, I'm pretty sure, or psychologist or something like that. And she has raised her niece Zoe for like most of her life, and so she has a really close relationship with her, and Zoe is now off going to school at Cambridge. She gets a call from Zoe saying, someone that I know that I'm friends with kind of died, and I think you need to come help me figure out how to solve it and figure out what's going on. And so there's this professor at the university who has this group of girls who are students,
cult following of female students,
where they talk about literature, and he calls them the Maidens. And so one of the girls who ends up dead is in that group, and Zoe thinks that it's the professor who's responsible for that. And so Mariana goes to the school and she decides, okay, I'm gonna try and use my psychology skills to talk with people and figure out
a little bit
what's going on. And so obviously they're focusing on the professor to start with, and then while she's there, more students from the group of the Maidens ends up dead. And so it's building in severity, or in seriousness I guess, in terms of trying to figure out what's going on so that they can stop more people from dying. And I feel like that's kind of where I'll leave that one.
That's all you need to know.
Then we have In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and the main character in this book is Jessica, and it's a dual POV in terms of then and now timelines. So the present focuses on Jessica Miller, who's in her early 30s, and she's living in New York City. She feels like she's done well with her life. She has a good job. She feels good about her looks, and she's just like, she very much needs to like please other people, and she wants people to see her as being super successful. And so she ends up getting a letter about their college's 10-year anniversary reunion, and she's just really excited to go back to that college town and
she's like,
show herself to the people there. And so she goes back, and then you also realize that she has this group of friends that she was super close with in college, but things towards the end kind of fizzled out and didn't end super well because one of the people in their friend group was killed, and they were supposedly killed by someone else in their friend group. They did not end up getting convicted, but obviously that kind of left their whole friend group in shambles and not really super close the past 10 years since they left school. And so she goes back. She's not expecting to have anything to do with any sort of like case or anything, but the brother of the victim gathers all of this friend group together and is like, I think one of you killed her, and so I'm going to figure out what exactly happened back then. So you're going back and forth between different time periods in their college and like figuring out how the characters became friends and how their relationships with each other are different and who likes who.
And
there's a lot of
triangles and like
love triangles, relationships, things that were kind of confusing. But you get used to it once you get a little bit further in the book. The thing that I thought was similar to this book and The Maidens was that they're both in an academic setting. They both have like untrustworthy professors, and I felt like both of these books did a really good job having a mystery throughout, but then also like a really good twist. Some of them, like this one I thought had twists throughout, versus The Maidens had more of like one big twist. But I feel like a lot of times with mysteries / thrillers, you kind of start to see things coming, which is fine, but these ones I felt like had a good twist to them. And then also for how they're different, one is currently happening and then more people keep turning up dead, so The Maidens is more like high stakes,
like an ongoing
need things to
mystery.
like, you need to figure out what's going on right now, versus this one is trying to figure out something from the past. And there's also only like one person that was dead. And then there's more complex characters / relationships going on in this book, I think, and you get a lot more insight into that than you do in like The Maidens, where it's more focused on like the plot of the story.
Alright, so this is going to complete part 1 of our If You've Read This, Then You Should Read This book. Hope you guys enjoyed it, because we are indeed going to start filming a part 2 right now, so that will be coming. If you did enjoy it, make sure you give a thumbs up. Also subscribe to our channel down below. Feel free to leave any other like book related content suggestions. Megan and I are kind of always on like the hunt for what types of videos you want to make for that.
We also have a podcast called According To that you guys could go check out anywhere you listen to podcasts. We post every single Thursday, so make sure you guys check that out if you have not already.
And we'll see you guys in our next video. Bye!
Bye.